Hello everybody, and welcome to another video. This is my first video in about 2 months, so I do apologize for that. I've wanted to do some videos, but I just haven't really come up with anything I wanted to do, and anything I did want to do, I couldn't do yet, such as this video. So I do apologize for that, but I do have some more stuff planned for this channel for before the end of the year. Not a whole lot, just a handful of videos and some other stuff that I would like to do at some point, but I don't know when. Today I am going to do a Star Wars films ranking, ranking the 11 Star Wars films from 1 to 9, plus Solo and Rogue One, and I'll be ranking them from my least favorite to my favorite. And the reason why I'm doing this is, first of all, because I haven't done one on this channel before, and also the last ranking video that I did on my old channel, which if you look up Revan1207 on YouTube, you will probably find it. If you look up the YouTube channel, I don't think it's too far back in the uploads. The last time I did that was right after Solo came out in 2018, so it's been over 3 years since I last did one of these. Plus, I also recently rewatched all of these films over the last couple of months, and it was a really cool experience. A lot of them I hadn't seen in a very long time. The last time I rewatched the first 6 films was, I think, when The Force Awakens came out, so it's been like 6 years since I've seen the first 6, and then I had not watched the sequel trilogy like back to back before. I had only watched them individually. And so it was an interesting experience to watch all of these again, and I did watch them in chronological order, so I went from 1 to 9 and all the movies in between. And very quickly before I get started, just for some context for myself as a fan of Star Wars, because I know that sometimes people like to get upset about things, which is perfectly fine. If you disagree with my ranking, which I'm sure people will, that's perfectly fine, but just for some context for myself, I did grow up with the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. I was born in '99, so I watched the original trilogy first when I was a kid, and then a year or two later I watched the prequels. And then, you know, the Disney era films I pretty much watched as they came out on opening night. And I've enjoyed all of these movies at some point or another, and I still nowadays enjoy all of these to some extent. There is not a single one that I actually don't like. There have been in the past. As a teenager, I grew to really dislike the prequels, for example, even though they were actually my favorite as a kid. But I've kind of come around to them again recently, and I do enjoy them now. So do keep that in mind. Even the ones that are very low on this ranking, I still think are enjoyable, and I still like them, but they've got to go somewhere. So I suppose we'll get started. In last place, at number 11, is Solo: A Star Wars Story. Now this one I really don't want to put as low as it is. I don't want to put it in last place. It has always been fairly low in my rankings, but I've always really enjoyed it. But the main reason it's the last one in this ranking is that this is pretty much the only film out of the 11 in my rewatch that I just wasn't really that invested in while I was watching it. I mean, I enjoyed it, and it's a fun movie for sure, but I just wasn't super interested in it while I was watching it. But there are a lot of good things about Solo that I really enjoy. I really enjoy Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo and Donald Glover as Lando. I'd love to see both of them come back to the roles at some point in the future for like a Disney Plus series or something. And there is the Lando show that is supposed to be coming, which may have Donald Glover back, which would be great. But I would really love to see Alden back as well. And it's just a fun adventure, really. It's fairly low scale, not anything huge, and it doesn't really require it's not a part of any bigger story, really. Like Rogue One, the other spin-off, is also technically not part of a bigger story, but it is also in a way a direct prequel to A New Hope. Whereas Solo can pretty much stand on its own. Solo you can pretty much just watch no matter what, and you'll probably have a decent time with it. Next one at number 10, this is probably going to be the first controversial placement, is Rogue One, the other spin-off. This one used to be quite a bit higher. It used to be like on the bottom side of my top 5, I think. But this time around when I was rewatching it, again, kind of similar to Solo, it just didn't really engage me as much as the other movies. Although I will say the one reason that I put it above Solo is the last act, because I think most people who have seen this film can agree that the last third or so of this film, everything on Scarif basically, is like awesome. So the last part of the movie on Scarif is fantastic. It's probably my favorite land and space battle, both individually and together, in all the movies. But other than that, the first 2/3 or so of the movie, or however long it is until you get to Scarif, is good. I like it. It gives some good setup and introduces you to the characters and all that stuff, and there's some interesting stuff that happens for sure, but I just didn't think it was nearly as interesting as, the stuff on Scarif was. But I do really enjoy Rogue One. It's got some great moments, even prior to that part of the movie. Like, I really like the stuff on Jeddah, for example. I think that's a lot of fun. And seeing the Death Star and everything. And I think Director Krennic's a great villain as well. But overall, this one is just another one that for me wasn't super interesting up until we get to Scarif. And the main reason why it's not in last place is, or like tied with Solo or something, is because of that part of the movie. Now we move on to number 9, which is one that really hurts me to put this low. But it is The Force Awakens, Episode 7, the first Star Wars film I actually saw in theaters. And The Force Awakens is one that I really enjoy. I think it's one of the most just fun Star Wars movies. You can just watch it and have a good time with it, kind of like Solo. And this one actually used to be a lot higher for me. Prior to rewatching the movies, I considered this in my top 3, actually. So it was kind of shocking to me to rewatch it and be like, oh, I don't know, this one's probably a bit lower. But I do really enjoy it. I think it's a great setup for the sequel trilogy. I think it is pretty much exactly what Star Wars needed as far as coming back. I think it does a really good job of establishing the characters and establishing the story of the sequel trilogy. I really enjoy seeing Han Solo and Chewie again. That's always been one of my favorite things about the movie. I love the introduction of Rey and her story in this movie, and I think this is probably Finn's best movie in my opinion. I think he was good in the other two, but I think he definitely was less interesting for me. Poe, I think, was a little underutilized, considering he's not in most of this movie. He shows up at the beginning and he shows up at the end. But I do like him in the movie. And Kylo Ren, I really used to like in The Force Awakens, but this time around I didn't like him almost at all in The Force Awakens. I liked certain parts of his character, but overall I didn't really like him that much. I think he was much better in the other two films. But overall, The Force Awakens is a really fun movie and one that I really enjoy, but again, it's just not as much as the others. Next is, at number 8, is The Phantom Menace, the first movie in the prequel trilogy. Now this one is a little bit surprising for me because I used to think Attack of the Clones was very, very easily my least favorite movie in the prequel trilogy, whereas this time I actually enjoyed it a lot more, so it's a little higher up. But The Phantom Menace, I really struggled to actually rank the prequels in this because I really enjoyed all 3, but if I had to pick my least favorite, it would probably be The Phantom Menace. And the main reason for that is that I just think the other 2 films have higher highs. I think it's more consistent than Attack of the Clones in terms of quality, but I don't think it quite reaches the highs of the other 2 movies, aside from maybe the Duel of the Fates, which is definitely my favorite part of the movie, as it is for many others. But I think this overall is an enjoyable movie. It's definitely got some issues. Some of the dialogue and the acting can be a little weird at times. And the effects in places don't hold up super well. But I think the story is quite good, and I really enjoy just a lot of the stuff that happens in this movie. It does a really good job, I think, of setting up Anakin and where he came from. I do think that it may have been better to make him a little bit older, set this a little closer to Attack of the Clones or something in the timeline, maybe, but I think it was fine as it is. And Jake Lloyd, I think, did actually quite a good job as young Anakin. I do not think he deserved the level of hate that he got at all. I think it's kind of a horrible thing to happen. I think he did quite a good job, and I think most everybody in this movie does a pretty good job. I really enjoy Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon and Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan, and just generally I really enjoy this one. But the main reason that it is a little lower for me is that it just doesn't have the highest of highs out of the prequels, and I would say the saga as a whole, again, outside of Duel of the Fates, but that alone isn't enough to make this movie higher for me. So next we have number 7, which was once upon a time my favorite movie in the saga, and so was The Phantom Menace actually as a kid. I considered it my favorite, and after The Phantom Menace it was this one, and that is Return of the Jedi. Episode 6, the original ending to the saga. Now, I do have a big soft spot for this movie, as well as The Phantom Menace, but especially this one. It was my favorite one when I was younger, not really super young. I would say it was Phantom Menace when I was like a kid. This one was more of my favorite when I was a teenager. And I really loved Return of the Jedi a lot. But this time around, when I rewatched it, I thought the beginning was great and the ending was great, and the middle part was a little bit more of a mixed bag. A lot of the stuff on Endor mainly I wasn't as into, but other than that, this is a really great movie and a great ending to the original 1 through 6 saga. I think Luke is at his best in this movie in terms of the original trilogy, and I really enjoy his relationship with Darth Vader in this movie, especially, of course, towards the end. That's mainly where they kind of have that, and him and the Emperor, and Darth Vader and the Emperor, and the dynamic that those three have with each other, I think, is really good. And of course, the Battle of Endor, I think, is, in terms of the lightsaber duel, is probably the best in the saga. I love the duel in the throne room. And the space battle is really good. The ground battle, I think, is okay, but the space battle and the lightsaber duel are all really good. And I would say that this movie, out of all of the movies except for maybe Revenge of the Sith, has the most emotionally impactful ending. It just does a great job of ending the original trilogy and the original 1 through 6 story. Next one up at number 6 is The Rise of Skywalker, the final film in the sequel trilogy. Before I rewatched these movies, I thought The Rise of Skywalker would be my favorite in the sequel trilogy. Prior to that, it was The Force Awakens, but then I was thinking, Rise of Skywalker, maybe. But it turned out to be neither of those. But The Rise of Skywalker is a really weird movie for me. When I first saw it, when it came out, I generally enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was a fun movie. I generally liked it, but I also thought it was kind of messy. There were a lot of things in it that I wasn't real crazy about, and that really hasn't changed very much. This and one other movie, which I'll be talking about later, are really the only two movies in this ranking, in this franchise, that I really didn't change my mind on when I rewatched them. All of the other ones, my opinion shifted at least a little bit. But this one didn't really change that much. It is a little bit higher in my ranking than it was before, but my general opinion of the movie didn't really change. I still think it's fun. I think it's arguably the most fun movie out of the whole franchise, alongside Force Awakens and Solo, though I think Solo maybe to a lesser extent, and Return of the Jedi maybe as well. And I think it does a lot of really good things. I really enjoy Rey's character in this movie. I really enjoy Kylo Ren / Ben Solo in this movie. I love Emperor Palpatine in this movie. I think Emperor Palpatine in this movie and in Revenge of the Sith is at his best. I'm a little iffy on his actual inclusion. If I were the one to choose how this movie would have gone, I would not have brought Palpatine back, because to me, I don't think it ruins Anakin Skywalker's sacrifice like a lot of people do, but to me it just feels weird for him to just be back all of a sudden. I think if they had set that up a little bit more in the other two films, then it would have felt much more natural to me. But his inclusion, I'm a little iffy on, but I do really enjoy watching him in this movie. His presence in this movie, I think, is just a lot of fun. He is just so over-the-top evil, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. And the other thing that kind of bring this one down for me, the whole Rey Palpatine thing is another one that I'm not real crazy about. I like it in terms of the themes and how it kind of relates to that, but I'm not a fan of it in terms of how it's done, like for the story, if that makes any sense. I think it just comes off weird, and I think it could have been better executed. I think Rey being a Palpatine could have been a good idea, if it were just done better. But I don't think it was done really as well as it should have been. But really, those two things, Palpatine being back and Rey being his granddaughter, those are really my only two big issues with the movie. Other than that, I think it's fine. It is a little bit fast-paced. I think it would have worked out better if it were longer, at least if the pacing had been kept as it is, because it kind of goes too quickly for a lot of the big moments to really land. Like the Rey Palpatine thing, for example, when she learns about that, it just kind of is like, yeah, you're a Palpatine, okay, on to the next thing. You know, it doesn't really give much of a chance for that to sink in, I guess. So I think that is a little bit of an issue as well, and I also don't really like the whole Sith dagger thing. That being the way to find the Wayfinder, I think, is kind of silly. But overall, I do really enjoy The Rise of Skywalker. And even though it's not a perfect movie by any means, and I do have a fair share of issues with it, I do still enjoy it. Next up, at number 5, this is pretty easily the most surprising placement for me, perhaps aside from The Force Awakens, and that is Attack of the Clones. Now these next three, number 5, number 4, and number 3, could practically be equal. I really struggled to figure out what my order for this would be, and I actually considered putting Attack of the Clones in the number 3 spot, which I know to some people is like sacrilege, but I really struggled with these next 3, but I had to put them in some order, and I feel like Attack of the Clones, the main reason I put it at the bottom of this set of 3 movies is mainly because I just think it has the lowest of lows out of the 3. Those mainly being the romance sections. Now, I used to absolutely despise the romance parts of this movie, and like I said, this used to be my least favorite by a very significant amount. Mainly for that reason, and I also just found it kind of boring, except this time. Aside from the romance, I found it absolutely fantastic. I think that this has some of the best stuff in all of the franchise in it, but the romance really brings it down for me, which is weird because I think the romance makes sense, to be honest. I think it makes sense for Anakin to be acting kind of weird, considering he's been sheltered and part of the Jedi for all of his life, and he doesn't really know how to go about doing that sort of thing. The romance stuff makes sense for them to act the way they do, to at least a degree. I just don't think it's very enjoyable to watch. You know, watching the kind of awkward dialogue and Anakin being a little bit creepy is just not my favorite thing in the world. So even though I think it kind of makes sense for it to be that way, I don't really enjoy it. However, the rest of the movie I think is really great. I think the opening on Coruscant, the whole chase sequence is really great. And the quest that Obi-Wan's on Kamino, I really enjoy seeing the clone army for the first time. The stuff on Geonosis, I think Geonosis, pretty much everything in this movie from the moment they go to the arena onwards is like top tier Star Wars. I think it's fantastic. The droid factory I'm a little iffy on. I think it was kind of unnecessary. I did enjoy it more now than I used to, but I do think it was kind of unnecessary. It could have been cut down quite a bit or not included at all, and I don't think anything of value would have really been lost. That and the romance in general really are my only 2 issues with the movie. Other than that, I think it's really great, and I think it's kind of underrated, maybe the most underrated Star Wars movie, which feels weird for me to say that, considering this used to be my least favorite, but that's how I feel about it now after rewatching it. So the next one up at number 4, and again, this one was difficult for me to place, but it is The Last Jedi, which this seems to me to be very much like a you love it or you hate it kind of movie. I've seen some people in between, but not very many. I've seen mostly people say that this is one of the best Star Wars movies, or that it's one of the worst. And clearly, by putting it at number 4, I'm of the opinion that is one of the better ones. And the main reason for that is pretty much everything with Luke, Rey, and Kylo Ren. I love the three of them in this movie. I'm one of those people that thinks Luke is really good in this movie. I can understand why people didn't like him, for sure. I mean, even though I completely disagree with that, I can understand where people are coming from. I've had a lot of discussions with people about Luke in The Last Jedi, and even though I do like how he was handled personally, I can understand why people do not like it. But for me, Luke in The Last Jedi is pretty much on par with Luke in Return of the Jedi as my favorite version of Luke, as well as Luke in the Expanded Universe. I think those are like the 3 equally best versions of Luke. But also Rey and Kylo Ren, I really enjoy this movie. I think they are both at their best in this movie. I really enjoy their relationship and how this movie expanded on that. I think in some really interesting ways that I also think the Rise of Skywalker followed up with, things like the Force connection. I really enjoy this one. Really the only thing that brings it down for me, again, kind of like Attack of the Clones, is kind of just one thing that kind of brings it down, is the Finn and Rose subplot on Canto Bight, which I think is necessary to an extent. I think it makes sense that it happens. I think that it works for the story, but I just don't really enjoy watching it very much again. I mean, I think it's okay. It has some interesting themes and points that it brings up as far as like the weapons dealing, selling to both sides of the war, profiting off the war, all that kind of stuff, I think is interesting. I just don't think that the that subplot itself is all that interesting to watch. But other than that, again, I think this movie's really great, just other than that one thing. Next, at number 3, is a fan favorite, and it is Revenge of the Sith. This one, along with another one that is going to be in the top 2, I'm not going to say which one it is yet, but along with another one, is really the only one that didn't really switch placements that much. I did consider putting it lower in the top 5. As I said, this one, The Last Jedi, and Attack of the Clones for me are very nearly equal, and I actually considered putting this at number 5 and number 4. But I decided to put it at number 3 because even though I actually think, in terms of my enjoyment watching it, I think Attack of the Clones and The Last Jedi possibly had higher highs, I do think this movie has the best story in all of the films. I think it has the best story. And that is the main reason why I put it the highest one out of the 3. Because to me, how much I enjoy the story kind of trumps everything else. I mean, how much I enjoy just watching the movie is very important. And I would say that and my enjoyment of the story are about equal. Attack of the Clones, I enjoyed watching it, but I don't think it had as interesting of an overall story. And The Last Jedi, and I enjoyed the character work, in terms of like I said, Luke, Kylo, and Rey. But the story itself I didn't think was super interesting. But Revenge of the Sith, I think, has the best story, so it kind of comes out on top. But pretty much everything about this movie I like. I can't really think of anything off the top of my head in this movie that I don't really like that much. The closest thing is Obi-Wan going to Utapau to fight General Grievous. Pretty much the stuff on Utapau I'm not as interested in, but I still enjoy it. So there's not really anything in this movie that I don't like. I think the opening, the Battle of Coruscant, is fantastic. I think it is probably the best opening in any Star Wars movie. Rescuing Palpatine and everything. And Palpatine himself I really enjoy in this movie. You really get more of the kind of, Rise of Skywalker, like I said, is also my favorite version of Palpatine in the movies. And Rise of Skywalker is very much like the over-the-top, chaotic, evil, version of the Emperor. Whereas Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith is much more subtle, much more manipulative. It's a very different side of the character. and I really enjoy that, and I think this is Ian McDiarmid's best performance as the character as well. And I really like Obi-Wan and Anakin's relationship in this movie. I think it's, when they eventually end up dueling on Mustafar, I think their relationship in this movie, as well as Attack of the Clones, although I do think it's better in Revenge of the Sith, really kind of makes it hit harder. And the duel itself I really enjoy. I do think it's a little bit long, but yeah, Revenge of the Sith overall is just a really good movie. Best story in the whole saga and all that stuff. I also think it has the best music in all the movies. But yeah, Revenge of the Sith is number 3. Number 2 is one that moved up quite a bit from my past ranking. This used to be more of like 2/3 of the way down the list, actually, or maybe even more than that. And it is the very first Star Wars movie that ever came out. It is A New Hope. Now, I am very much, I think, biased towards this movie, which is part of the reason why I put it higher. I did also take my personal feelings about these into account, not only just how much I enjoyed watching them, but how much they impacted me. And this one is the one that impacted me the most, because it's the first one I saw, and pretty much from the very moment it started, I was hooked on it. I was like 3 or 4 years old watching this, and my little mind was just like, this is the greatest thing I have ever seen in my life. And here I am now talking about Star Wars. But in addition to that, I think it's just a really enjoyable movie. I think this one, aside from the number 1 spot, which by now you probably know what it is anyway, but this one, I would say, is the most overall solid Star Wars movie. Like, there's, again, not really any issues I have with it. It's a classic story, and it's set up really well. It establishes the universe really well, and I think just everything that this movie does, it does well. I do think some of the acting in places is a little bit off, and some of the way that, like, the dialogue is spoken and things. And there's certainly some ways this movie hasn't aged the best. But in most ways, I think that this is a nearly flawless movie. And that only leaves one movie left, and it's the only one out of my entire ranking that did not change at all after my rewatch. All of the other movies shifted around at least a little bit, but this is the only one that did not change, and that is, of course, The Empire Strikes Back. This is... like I said, A New Hope, I think, is a nearly flawless movie. I think Empire Strikes Back is a literally perfect movie. I have no complaints whatsoever, not even a little bit. The only thing that I can possibly think of is Luke and Leia kissing, and that's only because that was retconned to them being siblings, which makes that a little bit weird when you look back on it. But at the same time, they didn't know, so it's a little less weird, but it's still weird, so I don't know. But that's literally the only thing. Everything else about this movie I absolutely love. I constantly had a smile on my face watching this movie. I enjoyed it all the way through. Every scene, every moment, I think, is great in this movie. I can't really say enough good things about it. The opening on Hoth is fantastic. It's a great ground battle, and it really establishes... the title of the movie is The Empire Strikes Back, and this really establishes that the Empire means business. The rebels got the win the last time they fought, but this time the Empire is just wrecking them, basically. And this is just a perfect sequel, really, because it takes, the first movie, the rebels are victorious in the end, and everything was great. And then in this movie, everything just plummets. And we see all of the heroes and the Rebel Alliance as a whole just at their lowest point. And it's done so well. Yeah, overall, Empire Strikes Back, I don't really have enough good things to say about it. Like I said, I think it is a perfect movie, and it is, I would say, arguably the only movie I have ever seen that I would say that about. Is the only movie that I've ever seen that I would say is 100% perfect. There are 1 or 2 others that maybe, but this is the one that I think, I can concretely, absolutely say I think it's a perfect movie. So, that is pretty much it. And I know this was a bit of a long video, but I had a lot of movies to rank and a lot to say about them. So I hope you enjoyed watching this. Let me know down in the comments below, what is your ranking? Do you agree with mine or disagree with mine? And let me know what your ranking would be down in the comments below. And that's pretty much it for this video, so I'll see you guys next time.